Now that your son's dead, grieve, pack your bags and never come back. My daughter-in-law Sarah screamed at dinner. Her new boyfriend Marcus stood behind her chair, arms crossed like a bodyguard. The house was never really his anyway, Marcus shouted, pointing his finger at me. I moved out without a word. But what they didn't know was that my quiet son Michael had been planning something special for months before his accident. I will tell you everything. First, let me quickly thank you for watching Granny's Voice. Your support means the world to us. Phew. Enjoy our stories, please hit that subscribe button. Tell us in the comments what country you're watching from. We love hearing from you. Today's special shout-out goes to Kate Husson from London, England. Thank you for being part of our family. Now let me tell you everything. The kitchen table felt cold that Tuesday night. My name is Dorothy, and I'm 68 years old. 3 weeks ago, I buried my only child, Michael. He was just 35 years old when that drunk driver took him away from us. The funeral was small but beautiful. Michael would have loved seeing his old school friends there. But Sarah, his wife of 8 years, seemed more interested in her phone than the service. She kept texting someone during the prayers. I should have known something was wrong then. That someone was Marcus, her personal trainer who had been helping her through this difficult time. Tonight was the first family dinner since the funeral, and I thought we'd talk about memories or maybe plan a small memorial garden. Instead, Sarah had invited her boyfriend to my house. Dorothy, we need to discuss your living situation, Sarah said, cutting her steak like she was attacking it. Marcus nodded along, chewing loudly with his mouth open. Living situation? He asked, confused. This is my home. Michael and I bought this house together after his father died. Sarah rolled her eyes. Technically, Michael owned this house. And since we were married, it belongs to me now. My heart started beating fast. This was the house where I raised Michael alone after his dad passed when he was 12. Every room held precious memories of birthday parties, homework sessions, and late-night talks. But Michael always said this would be our home forever, I whispered, my voice shaking. Marcus laughed, a mean sound that made me flinch. Well, Michael's not here anymore, is he? Sarah reached across the table and grabbed my hand, but not in a caring way. Dorothy, you're getting older. This house is too big for one person. Marcus and I are planning to start a family, and we need the space. I looked around the dining room where Michael had blown out candles on 35 birthday cakes. The walls were covered with his school photos, his graduation pictures, and family portraits from happier times. Where would I go? I asked, tears starting to fill my eyes. There are nice retirement communities, Sarah said with fake sweetness. Places with activities and people your own age. You'd be much happier there. Marcus nodded enthusiastically. Yeah, and Dorothy, let's be honest. You can't afford to maintain this place on your widow's pension. The property taxes alone must be killing you. He was wrong about that, but I didn't say anything. Michael had always handled our finances together, and I had more savings than they realized. I need time to think about this, I said quietly. Sarah's fake smile disappeared completely. Actually, Dorothy, we've already looked into it. There's a lovely place called Sunset Manor about 40 minutes away. They have an opening next month. Next month. My head was spinning. Sarah, please. This is happening too fast. I just lost my son. Marcus stepped forward, towering over me at the table. Look, lady, this isn't really up for discussion. Sarah inherited this house legally. She's being nice by giving you time to find somewhere else. The way he called me lady, instead of using my name, made me feel like a stranger in my own home. Sarah stood up and started clearing plates, even though I hadn't finished eating. I've already called Sunset Manor and put down a deposit, she announced. You can move in 4 weeks from today. 4 weeks. 28 days to pack up a lifetime of memories. The movers will come next Friday to give you an estimate, Marcus added, like he was planning a business transaction. What about Michael's things? I asked desperately. His books, his guitar, his photo albums. Sarah paused in the doorway to the kitchen. I'll keep what's valuable. The rest can go to charity. Valuable to whom? Michael's old guitar wasn't worth much money, but he'd played it every Sunday morning for me. His book collection included novels I'd read to him as a child. Now that your son's dead, grieve, pack your bags and never come back. Sarah suddenly screamed, her calm mask finally slipping completely. The words hit me like a physical slap. Marcus moved behind her chair, putting his hands on her shoulders like he was protecting her from me. The house was never really his anyway, Marcus yelled, his face red with anger. Michael was just a mama's boy who couldn't make decisions without asking mommy first. That was the moment something inside me broke. Not from sadness, but from rage. How dare this stranger insult my son in the house we'd built together? But I didn't scream back. I didn't throw dishes or demand they leave. Instead, I stood up calmly, wiped my mouth with my napkin and said, "I'll start packing tomorrow." Then I walked upstairs to my bedroom and closed the door. I could hear them laughing downstairs, probably celebrating their victory. But they had no idea what Michael had really left behind. My son was quiet and thoughtful, but he was also incredibly smart about planning for the future. He'd learned that from watching me struggle after his father died. The next morning, I waited until Sarah and Marcus left for the gym before making an important phone call. "Hello, Mr. Peterson. This is Dorothy Chin. I need to schedule an appointment to discuss my son Michael's estate." Robert Peterson had been our family lawyer for 15 years. He'd helped us with Michael's father's will and had drawn up Michael's estate documents when he got married. "Mrs. Chen, I'm so sorry for your loss," Mr. Peterson said warmly. "Michael was a wonderful young man. I have some time this afternoon if you'd like to come in." I spent the morning carefully packing Michael's most precious belongings in boxes I could easily carry. His childhood teddy bear, photo albums from our family trips, and his father's watch. If Sarah wanted to throw away our memories, she'd have to do it without these treasures. At 2 o'clock, I sat in Mr. Peterson's office, feeling nervous but determined. "Mrs. Chen," Mr. Peterson began, pulling out a thick file folder. "I need to ask you a few questions about your current living situation." "They want me to move to a retirement home," I said simply. "Sarah says the house belongs to her now." Mr. Peterson frowned and opened Michael's will. "Did Michael ever discuss his estate planning with you?" "Not really. He said not to worry about legal stuff, that he'd taken care of everything." The lawyer's frown deepened. "Mrs. Chen, I think there might be some confusion about the inheritance. Michael came to see me 6 months before his accident. He wanted to make some important changes to his will." My heart started beating faster. "What kind of changes?" "Michael was concerned about his marriage," Mr. Peterson said carefully. He didn't go into details, but he mentioned that Sarah had been making some financial decisions he disagreed with. He wanted to make sure you'd always be taken care of. I thought about the expensive purses Sarah had been buying, the weekend trips she took with her girlfriends while Michael worked overtime. What kind of changes did he make? Well, the house situation is more complicated than Sarah realizes. Michael never actually added her name to the deed when they got married. The house is still jointly owned by you and Michael, which means your half automatically becomes yours completely. I stared at Mr. Peterson, not understanding. "You mean I own half the house?" "You own the entire house, Mrs. Chen. When joint owners die, their share automatically goes to the surviving owner. Sarah has no legal claim to your property." The room started spinning a little bit. "But what about Michael's half? Doesn't that go to his wife?" "It would have if Sarah had been added to the deed. But Michael specifically chose not to do that. According to my notes, he was planning to discuss it with you but wanted to wait until after their anniversary. That anniversary would have been next month. Michael had died 3 weeks before he could tell me about his decision to protect me." "There's more," Mr. Peterson continued gently. "Michael also set up a special bank account 6 months ago. He'd been putting money aside each month, and he named you as the beneficiary. It's not a huge amount, but it should be enough to help with expenses for several years. He handed me a bank statement. The number made me gasp. Michael had saved almost $40,000 without anyone knowing. How did he manage to save so much? He told me he'd been working extra hours and putting aside money from projects Sarah didn't know about. He was worried about your future security. My quiet, thoughtful son had been planning to take care of me, even if something happened to him. What do I need to do? I asked, wiping away tears. I'll file the necessary paperwork to establish your ownership of the house. I'll also help you access the bank account Michael set up. But Mrs. Chen, I should warn you. Sarah isn't going to be happy about this news. That was an understatement. How long will the legal process take? For the bank account, just a few days. For the house ownership, maybe 2 weeks to get all the paperwork filed with the county. But your ownership is immediate and legal. You have every right to stay in your home. I drove back to the house feeling like I was in a dream. For 3 weeks, I'd felt powerless and alone. Now I discovered that Michael had been protecting me even after death. That evening, Sarah and Marcus came home from dinner, laughing loudly as they walked through my front door. They'd been celebrating their future in my house, making plans for renovations and new furniture. "Dorothy," Sarah called out sweetly, "we brought you some takeout from that Chinese place you like." I came downstairs to find them sitting at the kitchen table with real estate magazines spread everywhere. "We're looking at paint colors for the master bedroom," Marcus explained, as if I cared about their decorating plans. "I think we'll go with a nice sage green. Very calming." Sarah nodded enthusiastically. "And we want to knock out the wall between the kitchen and dining room. Create a more open floor plan." They were planning to destroy the home Michael and I had lovingly maintained for years. "That's nice," I said quietly, sitting down with my takeout container. "Oh, and Dorothy," Sarah added, "the people from Sunset Manor called. They need to do a health assessment next Tuesday. Just a formality, but they want to make sure you're a good fit for their community." I nodded and continued eating my fried rice. "You're being awfully quiet tonight," Marcus observed suspiciously. "Usually you have opinions about everything." That stung, but I kept my expression calm. "I'm just tired. It's been a difficult few weeks." Sarah reached over and patted my hand in that fake caring way of hers. "I know this is hard, but you'll love Sunset Manor. They have bingo twice a week and movie nights. You'll make so many new friends." At 68, I was supposed to start over with strangers while my son's widow moved her boyfriend into our family home. "When exactly do you want me to move out?" I asked. "Well, we thought the end of next month would work perfectly," Sarah said. "That gives you plenty of time to sort through your things and get settled." Marcus pulled out his phone and showed me pictures. "Look at these apartments at Sunset Manor. They're really nice. Small, but perfect for one person." The apartments looked like hotel rooms. Clean and impersonal, with no space for a lifetime of memories. "I should probably start packing this weekend," I said, playing along with their plan. "That's a great attitude." Sarah beamed. "Very practical. Michael always said you were a sensible woman. Using my dead son's words to manipulate me was her cruelest move yet." But I just smiled and nodded. Yes, Michael was always thoughtful about the future. If only they knew how thoughtful he'd really been. The next morning, I waited until they left for work before calling Mr. Peterson again. "The paperwork is ready," he told me. "Would you like me to serve Sarah with the legal documents, or would you prefer to tell her yourself?" I thought about Sarah's fake sweetness and Marcus's cruel laughter. "I'd like to tell them myself," I decided. "But I want all the legal papers ready first. If this gets ugly, I want to be protected." "That's very wise. I'll have everything prepared by Friday. Just call me when you're ready." I spent the week watching Sarah and Marcus plan their future in my house. They measured rooms, looked at furniture catalogs, and even brought over paint samples. Wednesday night, Sarah announced they'd hired contractors to start renovations the day after I moved out. "We want to get started right away," she explained. The sooner we can make this place our own, the better. Our own. As if Michael had never existed, as if our family had never lived here. Thursday evening I made a special dinner. Pot roast with vegetables, just like I used to make for Michael when he was growing up. "This is delicious, Dorothy," Sarah said, actually seeming to mean it. "You're such a good cook. I'm sure the ladies at Sunset Manor will appreciate your skills in their communal kitchen." Marcus was too busy eating to make mean comments, which was a relief. "I have something important to discuss with you both," I said quietly. Sarah and Marcus exchanged glances. "If it's about taking more time to move out, we really can't extend the deadline," Sarah said quickly. "It's not about more time," I assured her. "It's about the house ownership." Marcus stopped chewing and looked at me suspiciously. "What about it?" "I went to see Michael's lawyer this week. There seems to be some confusion about the inheritance." Sarah laughed, but it sounded nervous. "Confusion? Dorothy, I was Michael's wife. Legally, everything he owned comes to me. That's how marriage works." I pulled out the folder Mr. Peterson had given me and set it on the table between us. "Actually, that's not quite right in this case." Sarah grabbed the folder and started reading the documents inside. Her face went pale, then red, then pale again. "This can't be right," she whispered. Marcus snatched the papers from her hands. "What does it say?" "It says the house never belonged to Michael alone." Sarah's voice was shaking now. "According to this, Dorothy owned the house jointly with Michael, and when he died, his share automatically became hers." Marcus read over the legal documents, his mouth hanging open. That means I own this house completely," I said calmly. "Michael was never able to leave it to anyone because he never owned it entirely himself." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah stared at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. "But the realtor said..." Sarah started. "What realtor?" I asked. "We called someone to get a market estimate," Marcus admitted. "We wanted to know what the house was worth before we decided whether to keep it or sell it. They'd been planning to sell my home without even telling me." "Well, you can cancel that appointment," I said pleasantly. "Since I'm not selling." Sarah's fake sweetness disappeared completely. "Dorothy, this isn't fair. Michael would have wanted me to have security." "Michael did want you to have security. He left you his life insurance policy and his savings account. But the house was always meant to stay in our family." Marcus stood up so fast his chair fell over backward. "This is insane. You can't just kick us out." "I'm not kicking you out," I corrected. "You're welcome to live here as long as you follow my house rules." "House rules?" Sarah's voice was getting shrill. "Yes. No boyfriend staying overnight while you're still married to my son. No renovation projects without my permission. No loud music after 9 o'clock. And absolutely no more talk about me moving out of my home." Marcus's face was turning purple. "You can't control who Sarah dates. Michael is dead." The word hung in the air like a slap. "Yes, he is," I said quietly. "And I'm very aware of that fact. But you seem to have forgotten that he died only 3 weeks ago, and you're already planning to move another man into his bedroom." Sarah started crying, but they weren't sad tears. They were angry, frustrated tears of someone who'd lost a game she thought she'd already won. "Dorothy, please be reasonable," she sobbed. "Marcus and I are in love. We want to start our lives together." "Then start them somewhere else," I suggested. "I'm sure you can find a nice apartment with the life insurance money Michael left you." "The life insurance isn't enough for a down payment on a house," Marcus shouted. "Then maybe you should have thought about that before you started planning renovations on someone else's property," I replied calmly. The truth was starting to come out now. They hadn't just wanted me gone. They'd wanted to cash in on my house to fund their new life together. "There's something else you should know," I continued, pulling out another document. "Michael set up a separate bank account 6 months ago. He'd been saving money and named me as the beneficiary." Sarah's eyes widened. "How much money?" Enough to make sure I can maintain this house comfortably for many years, I said without giving specifics. The number was none of their business. That money should be mine, Sarah screamed. I was his wife. You were his wife, I agreed. But apparently, Michael had concerns about your financial priorities. Marcus grabbed Sarah's arm. Come on, babe. We don't have to listen to this. We'll get our own lawyer and fight this. You're welcome to try, I said politely. But I should mention that Mr. Peterson specializes in estate law, and all of Michael's decisions were completely legal and properly documented. After they stormed out, slamming the door so hard it rattled the windows, I sat alone in my kitchen and cried. Not from sadness this time, but from relief. My son had loved me enough to protect me, even after death. The next week was tense. Sarah and Marcus stayed in the guest bedroom, barely speaking to me except to make angry comments about unfair legal technicalities. They'd hired their own lawyer, who confirmed what Mr. Peterson had told me. The house was legally mine, and Michael's other bequests were valid and binding. Our attorney says we might be able to challenge Michael's mental state when he made these decisions, Sarah announced over breakfast. Mental state? Yes. He was perfectly healthy 6 months ago. People under marital stress sometimes make poor financial decisions, Marcus said smugly. Maybe Michael was depressed or confused. The idea of them attacking my son's reputation to steal my house made me furious. Michael made these decisions because he was smart and caring, I said firmly. He wanted to make sure I'd never be homeless or dependent on anyone else's charity. Charity? Sarah laughed bitterly. Dorothy, you're 68 years old. How long do you think you can maintain this big house by yourself? As long as I need to, I replied. And when I can't anymore, I'll make my own decisions about where to go. The legal challenge went nowhere. Mr. Peterson had been thorough in documenting Michael's mental state and reasoning when he made his estate plans. 2 weeks later, Sarah and Marcus moved out. They found a small apartment across town, funded by Michael's life insurance policy. Sarah left behind most of Michael's belongings, claiming she didn't have room for old junk. That old junk included his photo albums, his guitar, and books from his childhood. I spent a wonderful afternoon going through everything, remembering birthday parties and school concerts and quiet Sunday mornings when Michael would play guitar while I made pancakes. I wish you could see how everything worked out, I said to his photo on the mantel. You took such good care of me, even when I didn't know it. The house felt peaceful for the first time in weeks. I could walk through the rooms without hearing criticism about my decorating choices or complaints about wasted space. I could cook what I wanted for dinner and watch my favorite TV shows without anyone rolling their eyes. Most importantly, I could grieve for Michael properly, surrounded by the memories we'd created together. 1 month later, I got a phone call that surprised me. Mrs. Chen. This is Linda Morrison from Sunset Manor. My heart sank. Had Sarah somehow convinced them I was still planning to move in? Hello, I said cautiously. I'm calling because we received your deposit for our community, but we haven't heard from you about your move-in date. Is everything all right? I'm not moving to Sunset Manor, I explained. My daughter-in-law made that arrangement without consulting me. I'd like to request a refund of the deposit, please. Of course. I'm actually glad to hear you're staying in your own home. We always encourage people to remain independent as long as possible. The deposit refund was processed within a week. I used the money to hire a cleaning service and a handyman to fix some small repairs around the house. Taking care of my home felt good, like I was honoring Michael's memory. 3 months after Sarah and Marcus moved out, I received an unexpected visitor. I was gardening in the front yard when a young woman approached me nervously. Excuse me, are you Dorothy Chen? She asked. Yes, I am. My name is Jessica. I was Michael's girlfriend before he met Sarah. This was a surprise. Michael had dated other people before his marriage, but he'd never talked much about past relationships. I'm sorry for your loss, Jessica continued. Michael was a wonderful person. I read about his accident in the newspaper. Thank you. That's very kind of you to say. Jessica hesitated, then pulled out a small wrapped package. I've been carrying this around for months, not sure what to do with it. Michael gave it to me before we broke up, but I never felt right keeping it. Inside the package was a beautiful silver bracelet with a small charm shaped like a heart. He said it belonged to his mother, and he wanted me to have it as a friendship gift when we decided we were better as friends than as a couple. I recognized the bracelet immediately. It had been my mother's, and I'd given it to Michael when he turned 18, telling him to save it for someone special. Why didn't he ever ask for it back? I wondered aloud. Jessica smiled sadly. He said real gifts don't come with conditions. But after I heard about Sarah's behavior after the funeral, I thought you should have your mother's bracelet back. We sat on my front porch and talked for an hour. Jessica told me stories about Michael that I'd never heard. How he'd volunteered at an animal shelter, how he'd helped elderly neighbors with their groceries, how he'd always spoken lovingly about his mother. Michael used to say that you taught him everything important about being a good person, Jessica said. I wish I'd gotten to meet you while he was alive. He would have loved for us to be friends. We exchanged phone numbers, and Jessica promised to visit again soon. Having someone who'd known and cared about Michael felt like getting back a piece of him I'd lost. That evening, I put my mother's bracelet back in my jewelry box, where it belonged. 6 months after the confrontation with Sarah and Marcus, I was settled into my new routine. I joined a book club at the local library, started volunteering at the community center, and even taken up painting classes. The house felt alive again, filled with MY activities and choices instead of other people's demands. One Thursday afternoon my phone rang. It was Sarah, calling for the first time since she'd moved out. "Hello, Dorothy," she said, her voice careful and formal. "Hello, Sarah. How are you?" Well, I'm calling because Marcus and I broke up." I wasn't entirely surprised. Relationships built on shared greed rarely lasted long. "I'm sorry to hear that. The thing is," Sarah continued, "I've been doing a lot of thinking about everything that happened. About how I treated you and how I handled Michael's death. This was unexpected. I was grieving too," she said quietly. "I know that doesn't excuse my behavior, but I wasn't thinking clearly. Grief affects everyone differently," I agreed carefully. "Dorothy, I want to apologize. I was cruel to you during the worst time of both our lives. Michael would have been ashamed of how I acted." The apology sounded genuine, but I'd learned to be cautious. "Thank you for saying that, Sarah. I also want you to know that I understand now why Michael made the decisions he did. He was protecting you because he knew I wasn't thinking about anyone but myself." We talked for a few more minutes. Sarah was working as a receptionist at a dental office and living in a studio apartment. She sounded lonely and maybe a little wiser than before. "Would you maybe like to have coffee sometime?" she asked. "I have some photo albums of Michael from our early dating days. I thought you might like to see them." I considered this carefully. Sarah had hurt me deeply, but she'd also been part of Michael's life for 8 years. Completely cutting her out would mean losing access to memories and experiences I'd never otherwise know about. "I'd like that," I said. "But let's take things slowly." We met the following week at a small cafe downtown. Sarah had brought 3 photo albums filled with pictures of Michael I'd never seen. Michael at a company picnic, laughing at something off camera. Michael and Sarah on their honeymoon, both looking young and hopeful. Michael building a bookshelf for their first apartment, covered in sawdust but grinning proudly. "He talked about you all the time," Sarah admitted as we looked through the photos. "Especially after his dad died. He said you were the strongest person he knew." "I didn't feel strong," I said. "I felt lost and scared most of the time." "That's what made you strong," Sarah replied. "You kept going anyway." Looking at these pictures of my son's adult life felt like getting to know a side of him I'd missed. Our coffee meeting lasted 3 hours. By the end, we weren't friends, but we weren't enemies either. We were 2 women who'd both loved Michael and were learning to live without him. I'd like to do this again sometime, Sarah said as we prepared to leave. Maybe once a month. We could share memories and keep Michael's spirit alive. I agreed, with the understanding that rebuilding trust would take time. Over the following months, Sarah and I developed a careful friendship. She never asked about the house or money, and I never brought up Marcus or her previous behavior. We focused on Michael and the good times we'd all shared. 1 year after Michael's death, Sarah helped me organize a memorial service in our backyard. We invited his friends, former co-workers, and neighbors who'd known him. Jessica came, and she and Sarah were friendly to each other, united in their love for Michael's memory. I think he would have liked this, Sarah said as we watched people share stories and laugh at funny memories. He always preferred small gatherings to big parties. The service was healing for everyone who attended. People needed a chance to remember Michael as the kind, funny, thoughtful person he'd been, not just as the victim of a tragic accident. As the sun set and the last guests left, Sarah helped me clean up the dishes. "Dorothy, can I ask you something?" she said as we worked in the kitchen. "Of course. Do you think Michael would forgive me for how I treated you?" I thought about this question seriously. Michael had been disappointed by people before, but he'd always believed in second chances and personal growth. "I think Michael would be proud of the person you're becoming," I said honestly. Growth and change were important to him. Sarah started crying quietly. "I miss him so much," she whispered. "I miss him too," I replied, putting my arm around her shoulders. That night, after Sarah went home to her apartment, I sat in Michael's old bedroom, which I'd turned into a combination office and craft room. His guitar still hung on the wall, and his bookshelf still held his favorite novels. But the room felt purposeful now, like it was being used to honor his memory rather than preserved as a shrine. I pulled out the letter I'd been writing to him in my journal and added a new entry. "Dear Michael, I think you'd be happy with how things turned out. The house is safe, I'm financially secure, and I'm building a life that makes me proud. Thank you for taking care of me, even when I didn't know I needed protecting." 2 years later, my life had settled into a pattern I truly enjoyed. I'd become the neighborhood grandmother figure, helping young families with babysitting and offering advice to new homeowners. My book club had grown into a social group that met weekly for various activities. I'd also started a small garden club, teaching neighbors how to grow vegetables and flowers. The house that Sarah and Marcus had wanted to renovate remained largely unchanged, but it was filled with new life and purpose. I hosted holiday dinners for friends who didn't have family nearby. I organized game nights and movie screenings in the living room. Sarah had remarried, this time to a kind accountant named David who reminded me a little of Michael in his quiet thoughtfulness. She brought him to meet me before their wedding, and I could see that she'd learned to value different qualities in a partner. "Dorothy has been like a mother to me since Michael died," Sarah told David. "I don't know what I would have done without her forgiveness and friendship." It was true that we'd built something meaningful from the ashes of our conflict, but it had taken work from both of us. Trust, once broken, required constant care to rebuild. David fit well into our little group of Michael's memory keepers. On what would have been Michael's 40th birthday, Sarah, David, Jessica, and I gathered for a quiet celebration. We made his favorite meal, chocolate cake with vanilla frosting, and shared our best memories of him. "I've been thinking," Sarah said as we finished dessert. "Michael's guitar just sits in your craft room. Would you consider donating it to the community center's music program?" He would have loved the idea of children learning to play on it. It was a beautiful suggestion. Michael had indeed loved music and had often talked about wanting to teach guitar someday. The next week, I brought his guitar to the community center, along with a small plaque dedicating it to his memory. The music teacher, Mrs. Patterson, was delighted to accept the donation. "We'll make sure the children know about Michael and why music was important to him," she promised. Watching a 7-year-old girl carefully strumming Michael's guitar during her first lesson brought tears to my eyes, but they were happy tears. His music was continuing, just in a different way than any of us had expected. That evening, I called Jessica to tell her about the guitar donation. Michael would be so pleased, she said. He always believed that happiness multiplied when it was shared. 3 years after Michael's death, I received a phone call that changed everything again. It was from a detective with the local police department. "Mrs. Chen, I'm calling about your son Michael's accident case. We've arrested the drunk driver who killed him." The trial had been delayed multiple times due to legal complications, but finally, justice was moving forward. "The prosecutor would like to know if you're interested in giving a victim impact statement during sentencing." I'd been dreading this moment for 3 years, but I also knew it was important. Michael deserved to have his story told properly, not just as a statistic in a drunk driving case. I spent weeks writing my statement, trying to capture who Michael really was and what his loss meant to everyone who loved him. Sarah offered to come to court with me for support, and I gratefully accepted. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected. The defendant, a 28-year-old man named Craig Phillips, looked younger and more frightened than I'd imagined. His own family sat behind him, crying quietly. When it was my turn to speak, I walked to the podium with shaking legs but a clear voice. "Michael Chen was more than just a victim," I began. "He was a son, a husband, a friend, and a person who made the world better simply by being in it." I talked about Michael's kindness, his love of music, his dedication to his family and friends. I mentioned the guitar donation and how children were still learning from his instrument. I spoke about how his careful financial planning had protected me after his death, showing his thoughtfulness even in tragedy. "Michael's death didn't just take away one person," I continued. "It took away all the good he would have done in the future, all the people he would have helped, all the music he would have played." The defendant was crying by the time I finished. His lawyer had prepared him for anger and demands for revenge, not for a gentle accounting of everything he'd stolen from the world. After the sentencing, Craig Phillips approached me hesitantly. "Mrs. Chen, I know I can't undo what I did," he said, his voice breaking. "But I want you to know that I think about your son every single day. I've been sober for 3 years, and I volunteer at schools to talk about drunk driving. I'm trying to make sure other families don't go through what yours has." I looked at this young man who'd destroyed so much with one terrible decision. He was clearly carrying enormous guilt and working to make amends. "Michael would appreciate that you're trying to prevent others from making the same mistake," I said quietly. He believed in second chances and redemption. The conversation was brief but meaningful. I didn't forgive Craig Phillips. Forgiveness would take more time and healing, but I could see that he was genuinely committed to changing his life and helping others. That felt like something Michael would have supported. After the trial, Sarah and I went to lunch at Michael's favorite restaurant. "You were amazing in there," she said. "So dignified and powerful. Michael would have been so proud." "I kept thinking about what he would want me to say," I replied. "He never liked it when people stayed angry or bitter. He always looked for ways to build something positive from difficult situations." That's exactly what we'd all been doing for 3 years. Building something positive from the tragedy of losing Michael. 5 years after moving out without a word, I was thriving in ways I'd never expected. The house that Sarah and Marcus had tried to steal had become a center of community activity. My book club met in the living room every Thursday. The garden club used my backyard for workshops every Saturday. Young families in the neighborhood knew they could call me for emergency babysitting or advice about home repairs. I'd become the person Michael had always seen me as: strong, independent, and capable of creating joy for others. My financial security, protected by Michael's careful planning, allowed me to be generous with my time and resources. I sponsored 3 children at the community center's music program, paying for their lessons and instruments. I'd started a small scholarship fund for students who wanted to study construction trades, honoring both Michael's memory and his father's profession. The quiet strength that had helped me survive Sarah and Marcus's betrayal had grown into confident leadership in my community. People sought my advice on everything from family conflicts to financial planning to home improvement projects. One afternoon, while I was teaching a neighbor how to plant tomatoes, Sarah called with exciting news. "Dorothy, David and I are expecting a baby," she announced. "A little boy, due in October." My heart filled with complex emotions. Joy for Sarah and David, sadness that Michael would never meet his potential nephew, and hope that this child would grow up knowing stories about his Uncle Michael. "That's wonderful news," I said sincerely. "Michael would be so excited to be an uncle." "We want to name him Michael David," Sarah said quietly. "If that's okay with you. We want to honor his memory." The gesture brought tears to my eyes. "I think that would be beautiful," I managed to say. "Michael would be so touched." When little Michael David was born 6 months later, I was one of his first visitors. Holding this tiny baby who carried my son's name felt like holding a piece of hope for the future. "He has Michael's nose," Sarah said, smiling tiredly from her hospital bed. "And hopefully his kind heart," David added. I became an honorary grandmother to baby Michael, babysitting regularly and sharing stories about his namesake uncle. Watching this child grow and learn brought a different kind of joy into my life. Not replacing what I'd lost, but adding something new and precious. As baby Michael learned to walk and talk, I taught him simple songs on a small guitar I'd bought for him. Uncle Mike played music too, I'd tell him, pointing to the photo of my son on the mantel. "He would have loved to teach you these songs." The little boy couldn't understand the full story yet, but he absorbed the love and respect we all had for his uncle's memory. By his 2nd birthday, he could strum basic chords and sing "Happy Birthday" in a sweet, off-key voice that reminded me so much of Michael at that age. Sarah and David often brought him to our monthly memory gatherings, where he'd play quietly while we shared stories. 7 years after that terrible night when Sarah had screamed at me to pack my bags and leave, I hosted a celebration dinner for a very different reason. Jessica had been promoted to manager at her marketing firm, Sarah and David had bought their first house, and little Michael had just started kindergarten. "Look how far we've all come," Jessica said, raising her glass of wine. "Michael would be amazed at the family we've built from his love." She was right. What had started as a group of people grieving the same loss had become a chosen family, supporting each other through life's challenges and celebrations. We'd learned that love doesn't end with death. It transforms and grows in new directions. The house that had almost been stolen from me had become a gathering place for joy instead of conflict. Every room held new memories now, layered over the old ones like paint on a well-loved wall. Michael's childhood bedroom was still my craft room, but now it also served as a playroom when little Michael visited. His original guitar might be at the community center, but music still filled the house regularly. Sarah had learned to play piano, and David had a lovely singing voice. Our monthly gatherings often turned into informal concerts, with everyone contributing something musical in Michael's honor. On what would have been Michael's 42nd birthday, we organized the largest memorial celebration yet. The backyard was filled with people whose lives he'd touched, old friends, former co-workers, neighbors, and newer friends like David and the families from my various community groups. Little Michael, now 3 years old, helped me cut the birthday cake, carefully holding the knife with his small hands guided by mine. "Uncle Mike would like this party," he announced seriously, and everyone agreed. The celebration had evolved from a morning ritual into a true birthday party, celebrating the life Michael had lived rather than focusing only on what we'd lost. Craig Phillips, the man who'd caused Michael's accident, had requested permission to attend the memorial. After much consideration and discussion with Sarah, Jessica, and David, I'd agreed to let him come. He'd been sober for 7 years now and had helped prevent dozens of drunk driving incidents through his school presentations. "I don't want to intrude on your celebration," he said quietly when he arrived. "I just wanted to pay my respects and thank you again for showing me that redemption was possible." His presence was awkward at first, but by the end of the evening, several people had thanked him for his prevention work. Michael would have appreciated that his death had led to positive change, even through such tragic circumstances. As the memorial celebration wound down and guests began leaving, I found myself standing in my kitchen, the same kitchen where Sarah had screamed at me to leave 7 years earlier. But now, instead of anger and grief, the room was filled with the warmth of friendship and the laughter of a child who carried Michael's name and spirit forward. "Thank you," I whispered to Michael's photo on the refrigerator. "Thank you for protecting me so I could protect all of this." The journey from that terrible night to this moment of peace had been longer and more difficult than I'd ever imagined possible. But it had also been more rewarding than I'd dared to hope. 10 years after Michael's death, I made a decision that would have seemed impossible during those dark early days. I decided to write a book about my experience, hoping to help other older adults who might face similar challenges with family inheritance and financial security. The Quiet Strength, A Mother's Guide to Protecting Yourself and Honoring the Ones You Love, became a surprise bestseller in the senior living community. Libraries and community centers invited me to speak about financial planning, family dynamics, and rebuilding life after loss. My publisher was amazed when the book sold over 50,000 copies in the first year. The speaking engagements took me all over the country, and everywhere I went, I met people with similar stories. Adult children who felt entitled to their parents' assets. Spouses who made financial decisions without consulting their partners. Elderly people who felt powerless against family pressure. "Your story gives me hope," one 73-year-old woman told me after a presentation in Phoenix. "My daughter wants me to sell my house and move in with her family, but I love my independence. You've shown me that I can say no." That conversation reminded me why the book had been important to write. Not everyone had a Michael to protect them, but everyone deserved to understand their rights and options. The book's success also brought unexpected financial benefits. The royalties, combined with my existing security from Henderson Construction and Michael's savings, allowed me to establish the Michael Chen Memorial Foundation. We provided emergency financial assistance to families dealing with sudden loss, helped fund music education programs, and offered legal aid for seniors facing inheritance disputes. Sarah served on the foundation board, using her experience to help other widows navigate grief and financial challenges. Jessica managed our social media presence, sharing Michael's story and the positive changes that had grown from his memory. David handled our accounting, ensuring every donated dollar was used effectively. I hope you enjoyed the story. Thanks for watching Granny's Voice.